This is the Cap Stable Podcast, CSM10 Candidate Interviews. If you'd like to help support shows and efforts like these, please consider donating to the Cap Stable Patreon. Link at capstable.net. Pilots, here are your candidates.
Welcome to the Cap Stable Podcast CSM10 Interviews. I am your host, Bok, and this is part of our CSM10 election coverage. Today we will be meeting with one of the candidates. With us tonight is Jenshae Chiroptera. Thank you, Jen, for joining us and welcome to the show.
Hi guys, good to hear from you.
So, first question, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what is your background in EVE?
Well, I started out obviously as a little newbie, found a bunch of guys and they helped me get started in HiSec. I started with the whole mining thing. And a lot of people think this is terrible abuse, but it was incredibly social. We used to sit around talking, chatting, sharing links. It was like a IRC chat channel, except with mining going on. And then we'd build our ships, actually build them ourselves. Every ship I flew the first time I had at least built myself. And we went and did some PvP in low sec or fighting little wars and such. And then we branched into wormholes. I spent about a year in there. Then I had to take a break due to an injury. And after that, I've come back to EVE and I'm in nullsec now with Vault.
So this is your first time running for the CSM. Why did you decide to run this year and what are your personal reasons for running?
I could see when Matani was running for CSM, I could see the way he posted and the way he was doing things. You can go and look through my history around that time. I was trying to undermine his efforts because I knew he was going to be a bad CSM and there was just no way of stopping him because goons just voted him straight in. And then the results happened. You know, he totally embarrassed us on
on social media and during the EVE FanFest.
Yeah. And I could see something like that was going to happen because it's just a type of person that you get, a personality. So the main thing that I wanted to do was find some way of stopping that from happening. So that's why I'm basically doing this, standing up for this, saying, let's have a negative vote so that people can say that they don't want a candidate like that. Then HiSec would actually have an ability to reduce the votes for a nullsec person and raise the votes for themselves. So it might even things out. The other thing that really annoys me from being a miner, industrial and so on, is that a lot of the mechanics are engineered against you. There's very much a wait for gankers. The gankers can warp to you from somewhere invisible like a wormhole or the other side of a gate, and they can get to you and lock you before you can even warp off. You'd have to slow boat across a belt. It's the only way to avoid them. And when you're mining, you're sitting there for ages, your mind's drifting off, you're daydreaming, it's a boring activity. So there's no way you're going to be 100% focused 100% of the time. And you have to have that 1 second difference that you don't always have available to you. So I think it needs a bit of a shift. It needs a bit of a push to say, yes, okay, miners, it respects the fact that miners are going to daydream. In nullsec, I'm finding that you're getting blobs that are just alpha shotting each other away. And it's okay, great. So who's got the most numbers? And they just blow each other away. What do you do? There's not really any tactics. There's so many ships with various little tweaks and bonuses and things that aren't being used because they don't have enough tank or they don't have enough alpha. And when it comes down to it, you're limited to how many numbers you got. So you need to maximize tank or you need to maximize damage. There just isn't enough in the mechanics to deal with that. So for instance, I'm putting forward the idea of an absorb module, where Logi would then absorb some of the damage off an enemy. And that would then mean that they would have less that they can repair. So it reduces their repair bonus, but it means that people don't get alphaed off the field so quickly and easily. And the damage would increase. I mean, a fleet is going to have that distributed damage over their Logi, and they're going to absorb less and less as time goes by. So that's about it. More good fights, less easy kills. It's just trying to get a push more towards that. I just want, I guess.
So let's go back to your platform. The major point on your platform and what you are known for is your will to change how the CSM is run and how the voting is run, especially to find ways to counter all the nullsec alliance block voting. So I understand your need and you want to create an abstention vote, which is I refuse all the candidates and I basically a message of no confidence for the process and the candidates as it is. But what do you hope to accomplish with the vote against candidates?
With the against vote, for instance, HiSec is 71%. That's where the active pilots are. You can argue that there are alts of people in nullsec and such, but those alts wouldn't exist without HiSec. So essentially, EVE is a HiSec game. And if those people can vote against, say, goons, and they can knock off 1,000, it means it's 1,000 less that they need to try and get behind a HiSec candidate. It just evens the playing field because they're disorganized. I guess it's a false mechanic, but it essentially means that they can reduce that. And I do feel that certain candidates are simply there because they represent an alliance, not because they're particularly good CSM members.
So, but still, do you think that the STV, the single transferable vote, was a good bonus for the representation of other blocks and broader candidates not pushed by specific blocks?
I don't know. It weighs off. It's been some of an improvement, but I think there's still more room for improvement. And being able to vote abstaining from voting at least shows that we've reached the people and they're just not interested in the politics and the process and they don't want to support the program.
And you're also stating that 71% of pilots live in HiSec, many of them being nullsec alts. But don't you think that it's a problem of game design? Pushing all those alts to be in doing trading or trucking or industry or PI in HiSec?
Yes, that could be improved. It's quite possible that you can build up markets in nullsec, which is what they're aiming for. The thing they're going to need to do is they are going to have to remove the bonuses, traitors and haulers eventually. I think they should just make a warning for that, and that would help. I've also written about how they can try and consolidate blocks, for instance, having stations with the same bonuses for each alliance, so they can feel that they control their own systems and have different levels of that, and they won't need as many systems. They would need more spawns, or they would need tougher spawns that require teams to actually go in there. No matter what ships you have, you would need Logi, you would need other ECM, you would need to actually break it down, a bit like an incursion in nullsec. But that would help to bring pilots into systems rather than trying to spread them out as thinly as possible. So I think there are a lot of mechanics that do need to change in that regard. And yes, we are all going to Jita and Amar and such because they have the highest concentration of things you can sell or buy, and all the players are being drawn there. It's just the safest place to trade, and it's the quickest place to sell.
You also want to, in your program, to help defend the miner, the industrialist, the small player against all the griefers and all the Zerg mechanics and all the gankings. But still, in the last 2-3 years, there's been huge buffs to the defensive capabilities of all those ships. What else would you like to see or change?
The procurers and skiffs, they do have a bonus to them. Their tank is much better, which is amazing. But the problem with it is that no matter what you have, they're going to have a little cloaked ship that's going to come and see what's in the belt. They're going to monitor you for a little while, and then they're just going to make sure that they drop on you whatever can wipe you out before anybody can respond, which is why I've come across this idea of where orcas and rorquals can pop up a little bubble, and then the barges can hide inside that bubble, and that would mean that they'd be protected for 5 or 10 minutes. It's a bit like a mini pause, but it buys you the time to rally some troops, to get some people to warp, ratters to warp into the belt and so on. So people would have to come in with an organized fleet, and they would need to be willing to fight, not just kill. And obviously that takes organization, because to get an orc or to get a rorqual into a belt, you're risking a very expensive ship. and you have to build up a corp, or you have to get the right skills in the pilot and so on. So there is a cost to it for the miners, but there is a defense mechanism, and I think it would bring about more fights. That's the main thing. More fights rather than easy kills.
I've seen also proposals about redoing the raw calls as a kind of mobile pause with defenses and something you can move around with an operation and just sit and protect yourself with. So that would be kind of the same type of line.
Yeah, and the basic thing with that would be that you'd need to be able to link it to an asteroid, because it is many stages. They would just keep moving raw calls around combat, which I don't think it should be used for. I mean, it is an industrial ship.
And it was the design of wormholes initially to have people roaming around with a few ships with a raw call and just do a few things, and after that move to another location, another wormhole, or back to ISEC, NullSec, wherever they were coming from.
Yeah.
So you also have long discussions about the problem of alpha and logistics, and if our auditors remember the last Clarion Call 4 from Rooks and Kings, there's a long explanation about the arms race and the meta game and the changes in the game which are pushed by that concept of alpha logistics. You propose to force a scaling down of engagements and zergs, making individual pilot skills more relevant than simple numbers.
One of the things that I was looking into is where you could have, for active shields, I'm not too sure what active armor would do at this point, but active shields, their shield booster has the amplifier. So there's two modules there. Now the amplifier could be used in fleets. And what it would do is it would take the energy coming in and convert some of that into shields. So the more people that are hitting him, the more shields he gets. You have to hit him with a few strong hits. You know, you got to pick him with particular ships. You can't just sit there with a bunch of harpies and attack a large shield ship and hope that it's going to knock him down easily. It's going to need a lot more tweaking than that. The other thing was to have a delay in the alpha. So when people target, when they hit the guy, it drops him down to 45% or of his EHP. And you get 1 second in order to just switch on your repair modules and get your Logi going, because it's so frustrating. I am a Logi pilot. It's really frustrating to lock onto a guy and he just goes from 100% to 0%, and there's nothing you can do. Doesn't matter if your modules were running, he's just gone. There's no recovery phase in that. And that is very frustrating.
At all those problems of Logi, and I'm also a Logi pilot, and I hate selecting a guy and having to wait 5 seconds to know what is the freaking status, if that person was really hitting it or not, and the die kicks in and it's horrible to do anything about it. Wouldn't be a better choice to reduce the reasons for large scale and prevent the use or prevent the interest of having all those ships stacked up at the same location all the time, causing all those side issues of alpha, of tie-dye, of problem with the display, problem with disconnects, which is huge problems and why people don't like to fight in NullSec.
They are making the systems quite robust. We've had some incredibly large battles in EVE, and I think that is a headline factor. It is one of the things that does draw people in, is that they'll be all excited. They'll be like, hey, look, I'm in NullSec. I'm doing a bit of mining, or I'm doing a bit of, analyzing a few sites. And it's like, yeah, I'm really in here. And any minute now, a whole horde could come sweeping through. So it increases the danger, increases the excitement for new players that are going out and doing things. I tried to live out in Garista's space when I was a week old, and it was a crazy adventure. And yes, I kept getting killed until I had no ships and no S, and I was stuck in HiSec. But it was an exciting week that I spent out there. So yes, we could try and reduce the load. We could try and reduce the stacking, but I think we've still got a few tricks that we can use. That absorb module would be able to reduce the damage, so alphas wouldn't be quite as effective. And you can put the absorb module onto other ships, which increases their tank effectively. And that means that you can then field other types of ships. So you can bring in your ECM ship, you can bring in your active shields, whatever it is, but you won't have to rely on pure buffer tank and pure alphas,
Yeah, and it goes back to one other issue you had in your campaign, which is right now all the meta is around buffer and resist. It's never about anything active, never about anything you can do. You're just here. You're just a big blob of hit points that people are trying to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
And you also had a point about battleships, because right now battleships, they basically don't exist in now. There's no meta for them, as there's no real meta for battle cruisers. And right now it's tech freeze, which is the strategic cruisers, Ishters, anything else is kind of sidelined.
Yes. I think the first thing to look at with battleships, they're probably an easier case because there's more difference between a battleship and a capital. If we were to raise the tank on a battleship, because it's a big, heavy ship, it should have a big tank. The same thing as with industrials. You've got a freighter, it's got a huge tank. Little haulers, they should have quite big tanks because effectively it feels like it should be a big ship. But anyway, going back, battleships could be closer capitals in the tank that they have. Ships that you need to bring in through jump bridges or using a Titan bridge. And to deploy them like that, they have to be worth it. When you're looking at it, they've got 200 EHP or so at best, and that's what a Tengu's got. And the Tengu's much more mobile, it's quicker, it's got a smaller sig radius. So why would you spend 500 million on a battleship when you could spend 500 million on a Tengu? It just doesn't make sense. So unless you've got the tank to back up the damage that they do, it's not a ship worth deploying.
But don't you think that the tech-free, the Ishters, the capitals, and the bombers should be rebalanced before touching the battleship to find that kind of middle ground where they have to be?
Yes, I think everybody's saying that, and I do agree with it. The trouble is, what do you balance it against? I mean, I've looked in detail at trying to make something equivalent to a Tengu, and a Loki comes nowhere near it because it's just the weapons. 36 kilometers optimal with antimatter. That's meant to be the lowest range weapon. And then artillery on the Loki gets 19 kilometers. And the Loki's more speed dependent, and it's trying to keep away from webs. And it has to come that close to get up. It's just, I don't know what they did there, but somebody was just not thinking too logically, I think. So yes, it's difficult to balance them because they do have different roles. They do have different modules. I do think it's worth it. I'm just really surprised that they're bringing out these destroyers before they've managed to balance their cruisers. It's putting the cart before the horse. It doesn't make sense. Drone damage, from what I can see, it's still quite new. They're probably going to tweak it down. But it is interesting. I mean, I didn't really see a lot of drone boats before, and it's made a slightly different game.
So, going back to your candidacy, you are part of Volition Cult, which is part of Providence, and you have one of your colleagues, which is Core Blood Brothers, which is part of the CSM. So, who is your core constituents?
I think Core is going to win this year. I'm just not well known enough. So looking at it pragmatically, he's going to win. Probably most of the guys who've already won will win again. And the main reason was that I'd try and push my agenda, try and get people thinking that way, demanding from CCP that we have this shift, this change in the way things are done. If I win it, great. I will do the job the best I can. And, it doesn't stop anybody voting for me. I mean, the fact that Core is running and I'm running, other people can always vote. And I'm looking for miners. I'm looking for high-sec people to vote. There are miners in nullsec. There are miners that are sick to death of AFK cloakers sitting in their systems all the time. And they just sit there. If they had a structure in which they could wipe the cloak off, it would warn you it's coming online. But we could at least strike back at them instead of having to endure their presence. It's just ridiculous. So yes, there's just this whole section that I'm hoping to reach, a cross section of EVE. I'm not focusing specifically on what would be good for my alliance or my coalition. I'm standing as an EVE player, not as a Volition member.
So you're trying to use the STV broad support part of it, which is the good way and the best advantage of STV compared to the previous ways to do things. So what are your biggest strengths as a person, and what do you consider your areas of expertise in Eve?
Well, I don't really have any expertise. I do have a lot of generalizing. So I've led various fleets in wormholes and Provi. I've done logistics. I've done combat. I'm not particularly good on ECM. I'm really actually weak on ECM. I keep asking people how you do this. Doesn't quite make sense to me. People say ECM's their tank. I'm like, okay, if you guys want to fly without, shield reps and all these things, you go ahead, but that freaks me out. So anyway, so it's a whole lot of general stuff. I do PI, I do mining. I think it comes from when I used to stay in a wormhole. I pretty much soloed it. We ended up with very few people in there. So I took advantage of the whole system, did the best I could, had to defend it. So I'm not particularly super at doing any one particular thing, but I've had a broad experience in a lot of different things.
So the current CSM members list that being a CSM and being on the CSM is 20 to 40 hours weeks commitment just for that job. And that's basically a full-time job. Will you be able to dedicate all that time and effort for a full year?
Yeah. I pretty much do it anyway because the Eve time that I have, I often have a second computer open and I'm responding to things on the forums, doing mails, mailing people to try and get them to vote for me now. I'm a great multitasker. So all my time effectively is used all the time.
So, what do you think will be the biggest challenge for CSM10, and who would be the one candidate you would like to see elected with you on that CSM10?
Tough to choose. I like what Mike says for himself in HiSec. He does seem to be a good candidate. He's very solid. I'd like to see him come through again in the coming year. Core is always, I don't know, he's got a strange charisma about him. You should hear him on comms. He's just got this way of joking around with the guys. He keeps it light enough. He doesn't take the game too seriously. And he has a certain way of looking at things. And he's very good about not breaching disclosure and so on. But he talks about what's come through and how that can be possibly used and so on. And it's very insightful. He's got quite a sharp mind in him. So, I know him on a personal level, and I'd say he is a good candidate to go through for another year as well.
So how would you set yourself completely apart from from all the other candidates? And what would make you the specific candidate for something?
I think it's because I've seen various things from different perspectives. I've been the one out flying fleets. I've been the guy doing little gangs and squads. I've been in wormholes. I've been in HiSec. I don't know what low sec's about because that is just weird. It's so empty. There's people just dying in there. It's a really strange part of space to me. Nullsec makes sense, building up solves, all that. So I think the broadness, the fact that I do so many different things helps a lot in my understanding of Eve. I also find that I'm quietly determined, which means that I'm not always making a great big noise about things, but I'm always working in the background. Like, for instance, I can't fly a Rorqual yet, but I will look at the fit and I will try and make it do different things. I've looked at trying to make it into a battle Rorqual. I've then looked at putting it in belts, what you would need to be effective there. So I do keep looking around all different things that interest me. It's like, ooh, shiny, let's see, what can I do with this? If I polish that, if I do this with that, that's what it might look like. So yeah, you can see me on the forums. I'm constantly posting different ideas, trying to think outside the box. So I think maybe I'm best as a devil's advocate. I can step outside and say, well, what if we were to do this? And people will scream at me and say, no, you can't do that because Eve's all about the blowing up the ships. And we have to blow up as many ships as possible or something. But I can at least take different stances that are unpopular and speak for them.
So last question, is there anything else that we have not covered and you would like to talk about or address before we conclude?
I think that should be about it. Yeah.
So thank you, Jen, for coming on the show and talking to us, and best luck on your campaign. And thanks to all our listeners. Stay tuned for more interviews in this CSM10 election campaign.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good time.